Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar on Beyond Electric Cars. We've got a great lineup of speakers for you this morning who will share some of their knowledge and insights into how we decarbonise some of the most challenging use cases, but also looking at the role that technologies such as hydrogen can play. This is particularly well timed after the government's hydrogen strategy was published yesterday, which recognised the potential role that hydrogen could play, particularly for heavy goods vehicles. It's also great to see some of the investment that's been put into trials in this area, and I'm sure Bob Moran will say a little bit more about this in just a moment. When we look at the transition of commercial vehicles, the BVRLA has also recently published a van plan, which outlines some of the challenges that are facing the commercial vehicle sector, where the market is still lagging behind that of cars, and where we feel that more tailored support is going to be needed for van owners and operators to make the transition within the ambitious phase-out target dates that have been set. We're also in the process of pulling together our response to the HGV phase-out consultation, where the government has proposed to phase out vehicles between 3.5 and 26 tonnes by 2035, and those over 26 tonnes by 2040. This is only a couple of fleet cycles away, so we're keen to work closely with government and with our members to ensure that there's a clear delivery plan, the same as we've seen with cars and vans, which will ensure a smooth transition within the ambitious timeframes that will be set. We'll hear just a little bit more about this in a moment, but before I welcome Bob Moran to the stage, I just wanted to go over some of the housekeeping for today's event. So the webinar is being recorded and will be available on our website after the event with the other webinars that we've run. Q&A, if you go to the top right of your screen, you'll see the Q&A tab. Please do put questions in there for the speakers and the panelists. If you can highlight if it's for a particular panelist or speaker, then that will really help me to manage that. And just a reminder that all BVRLA meetings are held in accordance with the competition law. So please do refrain from any of the areas that are highlighted in red. So particularly around avoiding any discussion around pricing or profit margins, any discussions about future plans and individual company strategies, and also refrain from any discussions that name any individual suppliers, customers, or anything that's commercially sensitive. But bearing all of that in mind, please do keep the chat coming in the chat box and the Q&A. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome Bob onto the stage. So Bob Moran is the Deputy Director and Head of Environment Strategy at Department for Transport. Good morning, Bob, and I'll hand over to you.
Good morning. Thank you for that lovely welcome, Catherine. And hello, BVRLA members and attendees to this webinar. Great to be here. Yeah, great timings, these breakfast webinars. These are fantastic. We're already a month on from the publication of the Transport Decarbonisation Plan. And what I hope you have heard, ministers describe as our green print for decarbonisation in transport. Basically, the plan sets out government's commitments, the actions we think are going to be needed, and the time frame for the UK to achieve net zero, but also to cut a lot of carbon, significant carbon, along the way. Now, I wanted to stress that along the way bit is really, really important. This isn't just about some long-term ambition, something that's going to happen and materialise in 2050. Every gram of CO2 counts. The science isn't in dispute. I hope none of you were disputing it, but I can assure you that the latest report from the IPCC confirms the science is not in dispute. And we can see the effects of climate change all around us more than ever before. It's quite horrible, some of it. I think so. I would say it's on all of us actually to help deliver this plan, but not just deliver it, but turbocharge it to really speed up. The plan is actually it really, I think, sets out the minimum that we need to achieve. It's by no means a ceiling on ambition or action either. So if you're watching this, I would imagine you've got a big interest in this kind of topic, and you'll be following the net zero debate in the press at the moment, which I just wanted to mention. You know, it's really timely, obviously, in the run up to COP26, but you'll understand if you're following that just how difficult it is across the entire economy. It's technically difficult as well as politically difficult. I think we all understand that. But I always keep in my mind and stress it when I think about things like this, that decarbonised transport actually it's more efficient transport, it's less harmful transport, and ultimately that makes it better transport. So there's a whole load of compelling reasons why we should be doing this other than just climate change. Decarbonising transport can improve air quality, cut noise pollution, cut congestion, improve the health of our entire nation, as well as creating jobs and growing the economy. The cost of inaction is far higher than the cost of sorting this out now, and it's not yet too late. We can still do this. Okay, then, so onto transport, and particularly into road transport. I don't think it would be news to you that the majority of transport's greenhouse gas emissions come from road vehicles. Now, I remember doing a presentation about 10 years ago saying I don't think electric cars actually are going to save the world. They're not going to save us. And I'm pleased to say that now we've got a document and a planning commitment from government in place to say that we've got a 2040 backstop now for the sale of any road vehicle in the UK, any new road vehicle in the UK that produces tailpipe emissions. Might sound as if it was always going to happen, but we're actually the first country to set this out. Every vehicle from the smallest mopeds up to the largest trucks, 2040 is now a backstop. Now, that might sound like a long way away to you. It might not, but if we look at trucks and we look at some of the technologies available, we still don't know whether trucks are going to need in the long-term infrastructure to allow them to refuel with hydrogen, green hydrogen, whether they're going to need a network of rapid chargers, or whether, in fact, catenary and overhead wires are going to be the technology solution. Maybe it's all three. We've got a lot of work to do to understand what the future infrastructure requirements for UK roads are going to be. Then once we've done that, we've got to get the infrastructure procured, and we've got to get it into place in time to allow the transition to the fleet to transition. So that's why this year we've already got teams working on big demonstrations, not trials, of this technology that we expect and hope to begin next year, to put this technology into practice, not just on UK roads, but into UK businesses as well. So looking at things like putting overhead catenary onto stretches of the motorway in the UK. We've really got to move quickly to get this technology into operation, into UK operations. So we're spending 20 million this year on these trials. It's a significant investment, but I'm not suggesting that 20 million is going to be enough for us to fully understand this and fully develop it. So we're working really, really hard internally across government, and we need your help with this to make the case for increased investment in future years. And it really is vital that we get on with this now, because alongside the decarb plan, we've, as Catherine mentioned, we've launched a consultation on what the right end of sale date would be for non-zero emission trucks. Now, I said 2040 is the end date for all road vehicles, and that probably feels about right to us now with respect to where the market is, the technology, and what function commercial vehicles take. So that it feels about 2040 is about right for the largest trucks. But technology moves so fast, particularly in the automotive world. So if you look back down towards 3.5 tons and those lower weight categories, we think that those vehicles, you don't need to wait till 2040 to put that end date in place. So that's why we've split the proposal for a phase out date across the commercial vehicle segment and put in an earlier date of 2035 for vehicles of 26 ton and under. So, I mean, is that right? Should it be faster? Should it be slower? Is that the right level of ambition? Please let us know. The consultation is up until the 3rd of September, I believe. We want to get this right, and we need your evidence. We need your support and your help in order to do this. We've got to get the ambition absolutely right in order to allow this transition to take place. But we are going to deliver it. Alongside the Transport Decarb Plan and the truck consultation, we published a green paper of regulatory options, setting out just how we would use regulation to deliver the 2030-35 phase out dates for cars and vans. And we've identified within that a ZEV mandate or a sales quota is the preferred option. Look, there's no suggestion in there of banning engines. We're not saying the solution has to be batteries. But for most use cases, got to be honest, looking at things now, it looks like batteries are going to do a really good job, particularly in road transport, particularly in mass market. But that doesn't mean there's no role in the future for hydrogen. We had the hydrogen strategy published yesterday. We've been really clear on hydrogen in the transport decarbonisation plan. First of all, it must be green. Green hydrogen is going to be in high demand across the economy. If you look at the hydrogen strategy from yesterday, I think we can all take that away as a conclusion. So we think in transport, it's going to be best used where batteries can't reach effectively. So definitely a role for green hydrogen, definitely a role in transport, but potentially the most crucial of all, the key role, decarbonising all of those really, really hard to reach heavy duty transport applications. So I'm thinking of, yes, trucks, but possibly not all trucks, but definitely ships and planes, filling in bits on the railways as well, perhaps. So to get that moving alongside the hydrogen strategy yesterday in transport, we unveiled the first winners and the first applications that are going to be going into our hydrogen transport hub in Tees Valley. So that was a £2.5 million R&D competition to accelerate the use of hydrogen in that region, and so we can understand how it works and operates alongside the infrastructure and the rest of the economy. So that's really a really important step, getting transport applications underway. So to finish, I just wanted to stress that genuinely, it feels like sometimes when you publish, you spend a couple of years working on a document, 220 pages, you publish it. Is that the end? That's not the end. Barely a day off since then. This is just the beginning. It's really important that we keep checking back on that transport decarbonisation plan. Keep checking that it is in line with what's needed and feasible, not just across transport, but across the rest of the economy. And that is what that is how it needs to play a role. It's not just a case of looking at transport in isolation. It's a case of looking at all of this across the whole economy. It's really important. So I think with that, I will finish there, and I'm looking forward to some challenging, tough, easy to answer questions. Let's see.
So there's no questions in the Q&A box yet. So just a reminder to delegates to please put any questions for Bob in the Q&A box, and I'll take the chair's prerogative and kick us off with a couple. So you mentioned some of the sort of winners on the trial side. Are you able to give a bit more detail in terms of some of the use cases that those, particularly the trials for the HGVs, cover? But also, are there opportunities for people to get involved, and when are they likely to be sort of reporting back?
Yeah, so on the truck trials in particular, then there's kind of two halves to the picture. We've pulled out 4 or 5 big consortia of manufacturers, academics, infrastructure providers, and operators to design hydrogen fuel cell trials and to design battery electric and to design overhead catenary or electric road system trials that could take place in coming years. Now, we would run those competitions, I imagine, through our usual process, through Innovate, as we've run this one. So they are trials that are recommended and kind of accepted by government now, recommended by the Committee on Climate Change, that we need to understand what the infrastructure requirements are and how this is going to work with the rest of the energy system. It's important that we get on with that and do it over the next few years so that we can begin to roll out the infrastructure towards the end of this decade to allow the fleet to transition. Alongside that, kind of as comes through in the truck phase out consultation, there are some smaller trucks, but they're still flipping big trucks, right? Okay, that are battery electric now and have got really good ranges. So half of the funds as well have gone into putting as many of those onto UK roads and into operation as best we can. So there's a great project with Leyland DAF putting into service 10 battery electric trucks in the northwest, supporting the NHS. Similarly with Magtech and other supply chains in and around Yorkshire as well. So we're really excited to be able to support those UK businesses and get those vehicles into operation, because that's what they're intended for.
And I can see we do have a question from Greg Archer, who's on our panel in just a moment, which says, is there a contradiction between the transport decarbonisation plan focus on green hydrogen and the colourless hydrogen strategy published yesterday?
There's no contradiction. There's no contradiction there. I think we've stuck firm in the transport decarbonisation plans, talking about green hydrogen. This is part of our decarbonisation strategy. And we've worked very closely with colleagues in BEARS, and will continue to do so as they set the scene and set out what they think is needed to grow a hydrogen economy across the UK. I think in transport, we understand that we're not going to be first in the queue necessarily over the long term. Transport applications today could create demand for hydrogen, and we will play our role as we build the hydrogen economy. Our immediate role now. However, for the long term, I do think that green hydrogen isn't going to be in abundant supply necessarily around the world. So it's important that in transport we don't build a future demand that we're not going to be able to meet.
Thanks for that, Bob. You can be equally as nasty when Greg's on the panel and ask him one in return. Another one from me. So you mentioned the green paper and the ZEV mandate, but also, that combined with the CO2 regulations. Are you able to share any insight in terms of whether there could be different targets or parameters for cars v vans?
So I think the backstop for cars and vans is already in place. In terms of the uptake trajectories, then we're a little way off from deciding what that is. So this green paper of regulatory options talks about the lever or the mechanism that we might use. Now we've left the EU, we've got the opportunity to design our own regulatory framework that can deliver for our own ambitions. So it's really important that we design that and get it right for the UK. So this first step is talking about the mechanism. There'll be a second step further down the line, possibly later this year, that then goes into, okay, then, well, what are the uptake trajectories? What is needed in different segments of road transport? So yeah, I think cars and vans, I think they're very unlikely to take the same trajectory. Although maybe I'll be surprised. Maybe vans will come through quicker. But I think, you know, in terms of the regulation, then I think we'll be dealing with them separately. But the overall regulatory framework will consider all road vehicles in due course.
And I think we've got one more. So equipment changes are accepted, but what are the fuel companies who are only those who can afford to set up the filling stations hydrogen are planning to do?
Oh, is that a question for me? I'm not sure what.
I think it's what. Yeah, I mean, any insight in terms of what fuel companies are going to do?
Do you mean fossil fuel companies or clean energy companies? Yeah, I guess this. If it was ever in, I'd just say if it was ever in doubt that this change and this transition is underway and going to happen, I think that's. I don't think that's in doubt anymore. So yeah, I think if your business is in fossil fuels, then it's going to be time limited.
And then one more before I let you go for good behaviour. So how extensive would a catenary system be? Many HGVs operate away from major routes in hilly areas, requiring more energy per tonne. So is H2 a fringe solution, or should it be default countrywide?
No, I see it potentially as a range. This is my personal view. I see it quite like a range extender type of solution. I've been out to see the system in Sweden. I've had a virtual tour of Germany, who are now getting ahead of us a long way on this, actually. You know, but this isn't a case of stringing up catenary across every mile of UK road. This is about strategically on our big freight corridors, putting up some wiring that could potentially recharge or provide direct electricity and direct power to vehicles. I would still imagine that the vehicle will have a decent range of battery, 50, 100 miles, 150 miles within it, so that it could, when it comes off the strategic road network, then yeah, it can go about its business there. So I see this as catenary, as a not quite a scale electric. If you're not on the track, you're not running, but more of a range extender to battery electric vehicles.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us this morning, Bob. And I'm sure we'll be in contact again soon. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Take care. So next up this morning, I would like to introduce Tim Campbell. Tim is a consultant at Campbell's Consultancy. Good morning, Tim. Welcome to you.
Morning. Good morning, everyone. Well, thanks very much indeed, Catherine. I'll just fire up my presentation, if you don't mind, and then hopefully get ourselves organised. There we go. Okay. Hopefully you can all see that. There we go. Okay, welcome everybody. Thanks to Bob. I think you've got some insight certainly as to what the government's thinking. I think it's important that we keep that in mind as we go along here. My name is Tim Campbell. For those who don't know me, I've spent all my life in commercial vehicles, mainly on trucks, but onto vans as well. And worked for a couple of the OEMs, ran 800 trucks myself, owned the largest research company in Europe for commercial vehicles, and do the BVRLA's electric training. So, and I'm a council member at Zemo as well. I undertook the National Grid on the ventures side, their strategy for commercial vehicles up to 2040. So I spent a lot of time on the commercial vehicle side looking at this area, and spend my time going around the world. Well, I did do until last March, literally India, China, the US, looking at because this is a global thing. This is not just UK in isolation. This is the industry and the whole of the commercial vehicle industry and the OEMs all realizing, hey, this is a sea change and it's not just happening in the UK. And I think that's important that we bring that into it. But I think, as everybody said there, we've had so many over the last literally few months. We've had literally, I managed to get this in the bottom left-hand corner, the UK Hydrogen Strategy, which came out yesterday. But if you look, some of the interesting stuff, BVRLA have got the van plan. Everybody's getting involved. Nice one from Zemo, which is the low carbon. If you've not seen that, I'd recommend you have a look at it. Hydrogen well to tank pathway study. That's quite an interesting one. So we're all looking at either electric or hydrogen or a green solution. And let's be no in doubt. We heard that from Bob. We're outside the EU. I think the government see this as an opportunity for us to lead this sector, and therefore it's important that we realise that, and we're all going in one direction. And I think it's important that we understand that. So, and also, last but not least, the consultation to phase out. Yeah, I think it ends the first week in September. I'll be putting my response in there, and also Zemo will be as well, which I'm a council member of. So please have a look at it. If you're not happy with what's going on, or you're happy, or whatever it is, this is the opportunity for you to get involved. All the BVRLA members, I certainly recommend. I know Catherine's putting some words together for them, but if you want to do your own, they will take that on. So get involved, please. So, to me, there's four main things that I've found over the last 8 to 10 years where I've been looking at the commercial vehicles from around 2010, 2011 in terms of green and going zero. We have this low emission versus zero emission. Please be in no doubt. You heard it from Bob. We're going zero emission. Accept it. Look at it. And I know what you're all saying, and I'll bring it up in a second. We're looking at hydrogen versus battery. Everybody's saying the solution, there's no silver bullet. It's both. So, and again, it's going to be a mixture. And I'll talk about that today as well. Then, this is the zero emission, low emission. Is it tailpipe zero emissions or is it LCA? Again, these are the things that seem to come up more and more again. People obsessing over certain things, and I agree with you, and I think it's important that we do it. But in the end, yeah, zero emission tailpipe is one that we're going to look at. I know people say, hey, you can get negative low carbon, and therefore it's better on the life cycle. But let's get things in place. Let's look at zero emission on the tailpipe, and then also get LCA. Ultimately, we're going to go LCA, but which is easier to do at the beginning. And so let's get it in the right order. Last but not least, fleet versus owner account or owner operator. There are going to be differences between if you run one van or one truck as opposed to running 10, 15, 20, 30 trucks or vans. So there are four major areas here that to me come in time in, time out. When I'm talking to clients, looking for them to make sense of the confusion, and it is sense of the confusion, we're looking at those four major areas seem to come into discussion. So if we look at vans, solution appears mainly to be battery electric. We've certainly got some great products around there. Hamish, for you, I've put your arrival in the bottom right-hand corner, mate. But we've got some good vehicles now, all doing, or potentially doing. We have got 3.5 tonners now doing over 200 miles, according to WLTP. And they put around about 28% payload in there. So again, I'll talk about that later on in a second. What we've got to realize is it's not going to be that easy. We are trying to do what, if you take it the fact that we had 1880 was roughly the time that we got a powered truck and van or car, whatever you wanted. We're trying to do in 140 months what we've done in 140 years. So please, it's going to be a muddle at the beginning, and we're only just starting on the road. You're going to get confused. There's going to be mixed messages and along the sort of things that I said earlier on. But ultimately, always keep in mind where the goal is and where you're going, and you're not going to go too far wrong. I said battery electric for vans, and then all of a sudden we get PSA Group, Stellantis, suddenly coming in. By the end of this quarter, by the end of the quarter of this year, they're going to bring out a hydrogen fuel cell van. So they've got a perfectly good van, as far as I'm concerned, with the e-Vivaro and things like that. And certainly then we get into the e-Movano or the e-Ducato, the main group in there. And, you know, they do over just under 200 miles for the 3.5 tonner and around about 206 miles for the 2.5 tonner, the Vivaro, etc. But all of a sudden, from a company that got a really, what I consider one of the more acceptable vehicles on battery electric, they're suddenly going to hydrogen fuel cell. The interesting bit, and I don't know if you've noticed it, they're saying that's going to be rolled out to Peugeot, Citroën and Opel. Now, if there's anybody here from Vauxhall, they never mention Vauxhall. Now, I don't know whether that's because it was a European press release, but certainly Vauxhall did not get a mention, and yet Citroën and Peugeot did. Whether they don't want to do right and drive, whether they want, I don't know. But certainly they only mentioned the 3 product marks, not the 4th, which is UK based. So that's quite an interesting thing for me. So again, but what I'm saying here is, everybody's into battery electric, then all of a sudden a manufacturer, an OEM, who've got a perfectly good solution in this sector, have suddenly said, we believe in hydrogen fuel cells and we're going to bring one out. Not in 5 years' time. We're going to bring one out last quarter 2021, first quarter 2022. So again, there's always a little bit of confusion. One last thing before I go on vans, because I want to talk about mainly on heavy trucks, which is where life is. There are a couple of really big van issues starting to come up in here. Bi-directional charging as part of a smart grid. I talked to one manufacturer and said, okay, then your products, and they came back with this. As of now, neither of our products, I've blessed this out for the, roughed it out because of the manufacturer, are not bi-directional. So the vehicles could not be integrated into a smart grid. So again, all this thing about smart grid, we need the ability to put bi-directional batteries in there. So they really question. Also, some of them are saying, if we do bi-directional, what about the warranty? Is it covered for bi-directional? Am I going to halve it because I'm putting a charge in and out? Or some of them, one manufacturer mentioned me the fact that we might do it on hours, not on miles, because it's a battery in the end. Also, EPTOs. Have a look. If you're looking as BVRLA members, if you're looking, I'm talking to you people really and truly, is the fact that if you're speccing up, do you know if they've got an EPTO? Do you need an EPTO? Does it come standard with your electric van? And if it does, how much power does it have? Is it 1 kilowatt? Is it 2 kilowatts? These are sort of things when I'm talking to my clients and talking to them, and they buy a van and I say, okay, then what are you going to power that off because you want a conversion or whatever it is? They say, well, I don't know. I didn't even know they made EPTOs. Yes, they do. APIs, what data can I get from the van, electric van? It's important that you know what can you get from there. And then alternative fuel vehicles or alternative fuels vans. We know we've got the B license holder now. We can go to 4.25 tons, but there are issues facing that. First of all, some vans, because of the axle plated weights, cannot actually get up to 4.25 tons. They come up because, again, the 3.5 tonners that have now been extended. So again, looking at some of the things you've got to look at, okay, can I actually take that van? Also, if you have the plated weights, what's the weight distribution going to be like? Batteries, an electric vehicle in terms of weight distributions, completely different than a diesel. So the weight and the plated axles and, going into things like going into diminishing loads, all those sort of things. And those are the things that you've got to think out as BVRLA members. Overloading, axle overloading potentially could be an issue on that one. So looking at that. And the last but not least, and this is for Bob really more than anything else, the 2023, the 4.25 ton dispensation is to be reviewed in 2023. What about residual values? What RV would you be putting on a vehicle now as a leasing company if you knew potentially it could actually be scrapped in 2023? So what I am saying to government and saying to Bob is saying, hey, leasing is where most vans, 60-70% of vans are leased in some form or another, which means they've got a residual value. We really need to start saying to us, not so short case, please look at it and put 2023, give us an idea. It's up for review. Let us know earlier, because putting RVs and putting residual values on vans like 4.25 tons, you've got to think about it sensibly. And towing, yes, vans can tow, electric vans can tow. So get rid of that myth. Okay, that's vans and some of the issues I've got with the battery electric van. Not issues, but when you dive into it, the theory is great. And everything, but when you start talking to clients, and I'm talking to my clients and saying, have you taken this into account? There are solutions. It's not difficult, it's just different. And more importantly, it's just the fact that you fully understand this vehicle. An electric van is not a diesel van, and the way they work is completely different in the fact that the loadings are different. You've got to understand it. So please do that. When I if we look here, around about, if we look at the percentages, this is from the Eurostat table, around about 60% of all trucks don't go go to a maximum of 310 miles. So again, 6%. Let's not put the exception. Let's go for the rule. So when we look at that, those are the areas that we're going to look at: electrification and maybe later on hydrogen. Now, I used to keep like a Rubik's Cube and say to yourself, okay, there is no one solution. There's a silver bullet. I think Bob alluded to it earlier on. And what I used to say is, well, right, okay, look at the weight, because the weight has a direct impact on what you're going to be doing. A 7.5 tonner is completely different than a 44 tonner in terms of what it does. Look at the operation. You know, a cement mix is completely different to a distribution vehicle, completely different along a long haul truck. So again, that has a solution. And along here is the mileage, whether you're doing 100 miles a day, 60 miles a day, or whether you're doing 300 or 400 miles a day, that will give a different solution as well. So we're looking at Rubik's Cube solution. And in fact, that used to be a simple system. That was the simple days. Things have changed a heck of a lot. And I come to this. A matrix, no silver bullet. Remembering this is a marathon, not a sprint. You've got to make sure you've got the thing. So when I look at it, there's 6 things that you need to look at when you're looking at which solution should I look at. You've got to look at your weight, your GVW, DC. What am I carrying? How much, what weight am I carrying? Your operation itself. Is it local? Is it distribution? Is it long distance? What goods in the body on there? Is it a brick? You know, if you're on with a crane, a Hiab crane on the back on an 8-wheeler, it's completely different if you're on 7.5 tonner doing distribution work between, you know, I don't know, Newbury and London. Completely different. You're doing it in the Highlands. And that's what I mean by location. Centre city, urban delivery is completely different in terms of rural. So you've got different solutions. The premises, do you own them? Do you rent them? How far into the lease are you? Can you dig up your thing? If you want to put onboard fuel, on-site hydrogen, on-site charging, on-site major charging, can you do it? Have you got the premises and the fact that do you own the building as well as the roof? So you can put PV on there. Can you put wind on there? Can you put all sorts of different things? So again, that has a direct impact on what you can do. And last but not least, what's your mileage? As I said earlier, if you're doing 100 miles, completely different than if you're doing 400 miles. So we've got that. And then at this side, we've got everything in there. We've got the battery electric vehicles. We've got catenary or ERS. And for people that don't know what catenary was, I know Bob went into it a little bit more, but there's a Scania. And as he went on, a lot of the trials have been done in Sweden, gone with Volvo and Scania, and a lot done with the German manufacturers, obviously in Germany as well, along the line. So we've got catenary, we've got ERS, we've got hydrogen, we've got low carbon fuels, and we've got a hybrid of all of them. Where we could have hydrogen, obviously hydrogen does have a battery, but you might have, you know, a larger battery. You could have, as Bobby really do, catenary with a bigger battery, so that you can do that. So we're looking at a matrix of solutions. Somebody says to you, is it battery, is it hydrogen? My answer is, let's talk. Let's have a look at your operation. And you might be a business that in some operations, you're actually doing catenary, or you might be doing hydrogen. And for another contract, you might be doing electric. Please do not, it's not going to be pigeonholed. It's not that simple. Diesel was a solution to everything. Unfortunately, it isn't anymore, and we're going to do it. But it's, as I say, keep saying to people, it's not difficult, it's different. Get your mind around it. It's great fun, and but you know, you need to know and you fully understand the decisions you're making, because trucks, as we all know, are not cheap. They're high asset values, and we need to get it right. So, and a long time as we go along, time potential will change that. What might be a battery now could be a hydrogen, or what could be a hydrogen could be a battery later on. So you've got this in the back of your mind. So 5 main issues for me: truck availability and van availability. We haven't got it. Full stop. So, hey, availability of the product is important. I don't know anybody that can run a truck without having bought a truck. So, hey, the first thing, or a van, you need availability. Infrastructure, whether it's hydrogen, whether it's catenary, whether it's battery, we need the infrastructure, and we need, whether it's public or whether it's depot, those sort of things. The one thing about trucks is we won't be doing home charging on your truck. So that where trucks and vans disappear a little bit. Commercialization, getting your TC up, profitability. How do we run these profitably? Because that's a major challenge. Looking at life cycle analysis, I know people want to do it though. Looking at what Bob and the team and legislation and regulation, 4.25 tons, as I said, is an interesting one, but we need guidance, and we certainly need longevity in this sector. And then to me, intelligent interfaces. By that I mean good software that the van and the truck will talk to the charger will talk to the group of chargers that's on the premises, and then they'll talk to the cloud as well, getting interfaces in the smart, intelligent chargers that will talk to each other, and hydrogen or whatever it is. We need to make sure that all the interfaces within there are intelligent and talk to each other, and that's a major issue as well. So battery electric could occupy. We've got batteries on trucks on there. We've got Tevra doing hydrogen battery and battery. We've got batteries on the trailers. So we have got a plethora of trials at the moment to an extent. And that's the key is, I always say that the person that runs these trucks at this moment in time should get invited to the research and development Christmas party, because they are part of the R&D team. And I used to be an R&D engineer, so I know exactly what I'm talking about on that area. So again, get the great trials, important, but we now need to start looking at actually how do they work and what are the economies on there. Hydrogen fuel cell, I think we've already said, green is the colour, blue, green, there are 11 colours, there's pink, there's turquoise, you name it, wherever it comes from, the source, and I think that's an important thing. But hydrogen does have its place. I know Bob's saying, hey, it could be in transport into aircraft and to marine and everything, but I do believe it has its place to play on here. How big and how much, time will tell, but I think we should be inclusive rather than exclusive at this moment in time. So looking at where we are, I'm just looking at finishing off in a minute now. So when we look at infrastructure for BEV, whether it's for BEVs, whether it's for hydrogen fuel cell, whether it's for ERS, look at fleet versus SME, small businesses, home, depot, public charging. If you're home charging with your van at 18p, 19p, whatever, 16p, whatever it is, a kilowatt, completely different if you're public charging or opportunity charging at 35p, 48p, 50p, whatever it is. It trebles your TCOs. So again, knowing those things, your buildings will be driven by electric capacity. How big is the pipe coming in, electric pipe coming into your depot? Do you know it? I'm going to one next week where we're doing a site survey, looking at it. You talk to the client, and no, I don't know how big it is. I don't know what infrastructure. Hey, you need to know this. This is going to be part of property management. This is going to be part of facilities. You need to know that. How big is the pipe going in there? Vehicles are going to be energy sources on wheels, and we need to use them. There's particularly when you get heavy trucks, where you're talking about 300, 400, 500 kilowatt hour batteries. You get a group of those, 10, 20, 30 of those. We need to use those both ways. Dumb charge intelligent, looking at OCPP 202 so we can get the communication right, and ISO 15118, getting that in there so that we can actually talk and use the power of the batteries in them for the good of the grid and create microgrid so we can actually get a smart grid system in there. But it all starts with bi-directional batteries. Get more people involved when you're chatting on electric. Be inclusive within your business. Look at whether you lease or own. RVs, you've got to look at those. I'm afraid this is a data. Your people with cap and with glasses. Bob and Andy Picton, Dave Hill, people like that. Key Resources, looking at how the RVs change, what they're there. These are the practical things that go on there. And upside down financials. What you realise is diesel's cheap to buy, expensive to run. This new technology and new energy is expensive to buy, but cheap to run. And you've got to keep that. So that will change the way you do business, and that's the way you'll mark it down as well. So manufacturer-wise, Volvo and Daimler are doing a lot, signing a binding agreement for a joint venture. Daimler are doing a lot on the hydrogen side with Iveco, Shell and Volvo. Daimler and Traton and Volvo have signed a joint venture to 1,700 high-performance green charging points across Europe, and that includes the UK. So we've got manufacturers doing a lot together. They can't do it by themselves. For instance, all three have put $500 million in each to get it done. So the group I feel sorry for are the people that run the trucks and vans. They've got everything, the whole lot. And they've got to think about, and at the end, they've got to think about profitability, catenary, low emission zones, electric infrastructure availability, investment levels, corporate social responsibility, hydrogen, the lot's there. So with that, thanks very much. I hope you've enjoyed it. And yeah, it's going to be an interesting next 10 to 15 years for sure.
Thank you so much, Tim. That was really insightful, and yeah, your energy and passion is clear. A quick question from me before I turn to one in the Q&A box. You spoke a lot about no silver bullet and different vehicles for different applications and potentially a blended sort of approach. What are your thoughts in terms of the dates that the government is proposing for the HGV phase out, and also in terms of the categories? Do you think the categories, the 3.5 to 26 and 26 tonne and over, are right?
I do believe that it could be split slightly better. I mean, I'll tell you what my response is going to be anyway, Catherine. So yeah, I think N2s, for instance, those vehicles 3501 kilograms up to 12 tonnes are very heavy trucks, heavy vans, or very light trucks, and I think they could go quicker because they use very similar battery levels. I know we're up to, see, the Maxus E-Deliver 9 has got an 88 kilowatt hour battery. It's not beyond the wit of man to run a 7.5 tonner in the sort of like the 100 kilowatt, 120 kilowatt hour battery to do a certain job. So I think my response immediately is, yeah, I think N2s could go quicker, or potentially the quickest, let's put it that way. And the other thing I would say is, people say we should split it between rigids and tractor units. Then I say, okay, then what happens with drawbars? Because drawbars are rigids, but they run at much higher heavy weights. So you can't use that as a simple system. So my idea is, yeah, I think the government, arbitrary, I don't know why 26, because, if you think multi-axles, 3 axles, 4 axles, you thought, all right, 32 tonne rigids, but you get the same issue again. So yeah, 26 tonne, but I think N2s, we've got to look at N2s in a slightly different category.
Thank you for that. And okay, a question from Graham Manchester, which is, for both RV and also operation, there are issues with standards for EV battery management. What have you found is the answer to this?
Yeah, I mean, we've got the battery management system itself. We've got charger issues at the moment, which is a general charger issue. Recently, I was talking to somebody about, the handshake between the vehicle and the charger. People don't realize it can take up to 2 minutes. And what we had 2 minutes to do a charger handshake. People are pulling out and causing trouble with the battery management system, with everything else, by pulling out the cable too early, because we live in a society where we expect everything immediate. After 30 seconds, they think, oh my God, nothing's happened. But it takes a while for the charger to talk to the van, or the truck, or the van in most cases, and say, hey, who are you? What have you got? What's your temperature of your battery at the moment? What sort of battery have you got? Is it an MC? Is it LFP? Is it, and there's a lot of conversations going on within those vehicles. So we have got a lot, and we do have some battery management failures in terms of that, but it's not as big an issue as I think people are making out. But I think the important thing is that the fact that we need to have some sort of commonality, and OCCPP2, which is the open protocol that we get for chargers, is going to help a heck of a lot, because we need to have we need open source, we need open protocol. They're doing it now. Anybody who runs an electric vehicle knows the fact we have to have about 5 or 6, 7 different apps, everything like that. The government are looking at that at the moment. We cannot continue as we are, as one app for this, one app for that, one card for that, one RFID card for that. Forget all that. We need to have open source for virtually everything, so that we can help out the industry, because that's going to help the rollout completely.
Thank you, Tim. And unfortunately, we've run out of time. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Okay, and now we're moving on to our panel discussion. So on the panel this morning, we have Denise Beedell, who's the Public Policy Manager, Vans and Urban for Logistics UK. Greg Archer, UK Director at Transport and Environment. Hamish Phillips, Head of Sales at Arrival. And Laura Holloway, who is the Head of Government and Public Affairs at Enterprise Holdings. So thank you all for joining me this morning. I think we're just waiting for Greg, but whilst we are, Denise, perhaps, we heard a lot from Tim there in terms of, some of the challenges facing both cars and vans. I'm sure you're hearing quite a lot from your members too. So could you perhaps share with us, thinking about both vans and trucks, what some of those key challenges are and how you think we should be seeking to overcome those challenges?
Well, I think Tim outlined what a lot of the challenges are very, very well. Our members are saying the same thing about availability and different model types as well. I think Tim's point about, it took us 140 years to get where we are now, and we're trying to change this in the same period of months. And so we will have to be sort of patient, I think, as we learn how to change the way we operate things. We've also got this huge knowledge gap as well. Everybody knows how diesel works, or petrol if you've got a very small van. But, we're having to learn about energy systems, how to connect to the grid, how to do all of that. Hydrogen is another technology that we're going to have to learn about as well. So we're just going to have to, I think, be kind to ourselves as well. We are not going to get all the answers straight away. Vehicle availability and infrastructure and our knowledge, I think, are some of the key points.
Thanks, Denise. And Hamish, perhaps, you're at the forefront of some of the change that we're seeing on the van side of things. Are you able to share any sort of trends that you're currently seeing in the van market? How do you see these playing out over time? And also, what feedback are you getting from your customers, and how are you looking to bridge that gap?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thanks for the question. So in terms of trends, I think largely you can see that pretty much any ELCV that is built today is snapped up. There is no demand out exceeds supply. There are a couple of reasons for that. A, because of the period we've been going through with COVID is leading to more online shopping, etc. So we have a greater demand for vans overall. But B, also we've got this movement to electrification, which we're discussing today. And then finally, as well, we have a shortage, a semiconductor shortage, which is causing a shortage across the van sector, across all types of vehicles. And so any ELCV that's built is snapped up, and so the waiting lists are very long. So that's a good thing in some ways. It means demand's there, but the problem is we need to build up production. Naturally, that's what we at Arrival will start doing when we go into production next year. In terms of what customers are looking for, essentially, for a van, without stating the obvious, you need something that does the job. It's very different to a car. And for a van to do the job, it needs to do the mileage. It needs to be able to be recharged at an appropriate level, and it needs to be able to have the correct payload. And all of this needs to be wrapped up in a kind of total cost of ownership that's the same or better than the internal combustion engine vehicle equivalent. And I think that is broadly and very simply what operators want. And a couple of key challenges within that are obviously at the moment the total cost of ownership, the payload, and indeed the charging. And I think maybe just to cover those really quickly, so we have to drive down the cost of the list price of ELCVs. You have to ensure that the payload that they're able to take is equivalent of an internal combustion engine vehicle. And then in terms of recharging, you need to be able to look at all forms of recharging, because especially when it comes to 3.5 tons, you're very unlikely to be able to charge that at home. A lot of van operators or fleets do not have the ability to charge or do not go to base overnight. So you have to have this middle area. There's this kind of exposed area where there's kind of you need to have a middle ground where people can charge that's close to home. And I think there's quite a lot of work going on, certainly by us at the moment, to work out how we can help fleets charge their vehicles if they're not charging at home or in depots, but somewhere in between.
Thanks, Hamish. And Greg, I could see you nodding as Hamish was talking there, and also reflecting on a question that we had from Jim Blair that we didn't get to ask Tim, which was, there's still a lot of work to be done in infrastructure for BEV and hydrogen. HGVs seem to be way behind cars, and we know that vans are lagging behind cars. So a couple of questions. One is, are the targets for HGVs too ambitious? And the other would be, when we're looking at some of the policy developments, do you think there does need to be a differentiation between cars and vans?
So on that second question, I think the basic policies need to be the same, but they need to be targeted differently. So Hamish mentioned the problem of supply of light commercial vehicles. The way that we address that is through a ZEV mandate, a zero emission vehicles mandate on the manufacturers. We set that target level, I think, at the same level as for cars, which should be around a quarter of sales in 2025. And then the manufacturers will increase their supply to the UK market in order to ensure that they meet those targets if the penalties have been set at the right level and they don't want to miss their targets and be fined. So we can do that. That will drive supply. That will help to bring the price down as well, because the manufacturers will start to manufacture at scale in a way that they haven't done so far. Yes, we do need to think much more about how vans are going to be charged. There is progress being made in relation to depots, which is really good. Ofgem are consulting on changes to the way in which those costs for grid connections are allocated at the moment, and we hope that will change by 2023. But in particular, we need to get local authorities to start to think about the needs of van users and van owners as part of their local infrastructure plans. The government has £90 million allocated for local authorities. It's designing a new local authority support scheme. I'm part of the group that's working on that, and I shall make sure that vans are definitely one of the considerations that get built into that, because up until now, I don't think there has been enough attention to that issue. But I would also say that it's not necessarily about putting a charge point outside a van owner's house. I think there's plenty of good places where vans could be charged. Station car parks are hardly used at night. They need charge points for cars during the day, but they could also be centres for van charging at night, for example, and they have really good electricity supply. I think, school car parks might be another place you could do this. We've got to start to think about how we use our resources throughout a 24-hour period, not just during the day or at night.
Thanks, Greg. And Laura, I know that you've been doing some trials with hydrogen vehicles. So are you able to perhaps share some insights in terms of any feedback that you've had from customers and you as a business in terms of those hydrogen vehicles, and what aspects have you found most challenging?
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. Absolutely. I mean, as you say, we've done some challenges as a business. We've had actually, we've been talking a lot about vans and HGVs on this call, but the hydrogen vehicles we've had are actually cars purely for a supply issue, because they were the ones that were available. We haven't actually kind of decided where they'll fit in for us as a business yet, largely because our customers haven't actually decided how they will fit in for their needs either. So we've been using some hydrogen cars to sort of trial different kind of use cases. So we've used them with some of our corporate customers where they're close to some of the refueling points. We've used them in a kind of retail setting as part of a mobility hub, but we've also used them and been allowing politicians and other kind of stakeholders to trial the vehicles so they can actually see how they work in practice, so that a lot of the people that are talking about hydrogen maybe haven't ever had a hydrogen vehicle for any length of time. So it's actually been quite useful for some, I think, to actually have a vehicle, have to fuel it, drive it, use it, and actually see things like, do you get the range projected? How does it actually drive? How does the refueling process work? If you can find a refueling point, is it easy? Is it really difficult, etc. So those are some of the things we've been trying to trial and get some feedback on. And the feedback on the actual use of the vehicles has been really positive, and we've had some people really enjoying driving the vehicles. But I suppose, in common with a lot of what other people have said today, one of the main issues that we found is on the refueling side of things. So obviously, as everyone knows, there isn't a tremendous number of refueling points across the UK at the moment. And actually, we found that some of them do tend to be out of action at any one time. And it's a little bit difficult to know until you arrive there that it's out of action, which obviously presents a difficulty because it's not like there's always one just up the road. So I suppose if it was going to become a long-term solution for our customers, it would need to be something where we could be sure that they could refuel the vehicles very easily, and they'd have really good access to fueling points. I mean, we had one MP actually all set to have a vehicle over the summer, and actually, he's very close to one of the refueling points. But then we found that point was actually going to be completely out of action for a while because they were waiting for a part, and it wasn't very clear as to when it would be repaired. So it was sort of, well, there's, I can't really have it because the nearest one's 200 miles from me now. So it was, if it's going to become that kind of reliable technology, I think we need to see a real expansion in refueling. But having said that, we've also had some of our staff use them as company cars, and they've actually really enjoyed it where they're located. Tend to be in the southeast for this, around that kind of ring where there's chargers a kind of ring around in the southeast. they've actually really enjoyed using them because they have had access to refueling, and they found it actually very simple. You kind of turn up and refuel it, you go away a bit more like a traditional petrol or diesel vehicle experience. So there is definitely work to do on the infrastructure side, but there has been some good feedback, and I think perhaps next we might look to trial something like the HGVs or vans to see what the differences are in the use of those.
Thanks, Laura. And Greg, do you have any sort of insights in terms of where you think hydrogen is going to have the biggest role to play for road transport?
I think there will be niches for hydrogen in transport, but I think those niches in vehicles are likely to be very limited. I think it's very clear that the van market will be overwhelmingly battery electric. I think the light truck market, urban and regional deliveries, will also be largely battery electric. I think there remains a question about what we do with long haul trucks. Do we have fast chargers? Do we have catenary systems, as Bob described, that charge the vehicle as it's moving? Is there a role for biomethane? Maybe a small one, but there is not the availability of suppliers to be able to shift all our trucks, heavy duty trucks, 44-ton trucks, to run on biomethane. We already import 85% of the biomethane which is used in the UK. So from my view, possibly a role in long haul heavy duty trucks, most definitely a role in aviation and in shipping, where we will need synthetic fuels for planes, combining CO2 with hydrogen to form synthetic fuels, and in shipping, combining nitrogen with hydrogen to form ammonia to use in ships. But I think hydrogen will be predominantly focused on those two sectors. And just to answer the question I didn't answer last time, are the phase-out dates right for trucks? Yeah, I think they are about right. I think they could be brought forward a year or two. And I think we need to recognise that 1 in 6 trucks in the UK is more than 13 years old. So if we don't stop the sale of diesel trucks until 2040, there's still going to be a lot of diesel trucks still running around on the road in 2050, by which time we need to have ended our use of diesel. So we're going to have to, I think, look at a cut-off date for the use of diesel trucks in the UK if we don't bring that date for the end of selling diesel trucks forward by a few years. Personally, I think the price of batteries is going to continue to fall. The diesel will become uncompetitive and the market will shift very fast.
Thanks, Greg. And Denise, have you got anything to add in terms of the sort of viability of those dates, and also, how are we going to overcome some of those challenges? I know that there's still a huge amount of uncertainty about what the technology is going to be, and we're waiting to hear about those trials as quickly as possible. But what's your view on what Greg's just said then?
I think the results of those trials are absolutely paramount, because we've seen a different change in attitude simply from the end of last year with the 10-point plan and the phase-out date for new diesel vans. That different conversations are taking place now. People know it's happening. We've seen a lot more vehicles come through from the manufacturers for the van market. And obviously that's going to start accelerating. I think it's these clear signals from government that actually set the pace. So we need to get this right. I think there's a lot of discussion still to be had because the technology is there. But I think it's really a question now of looking at what are the supplementary things as well that need to go alongside it. And I think we mustn't underestimate the skills challenge here. When we tend to talk about training people, we tend to think about servicing and maintaining the vehicles, and that's also very important. But to take Laura's point about, charge points and refueling stations not being in operation, we also need to make sure that skill set's developed for maintaining a really high standard of availability for all the infrastructure that's going to go with that. And not least, and it comes back to my point again about that knowledge gap within our sector for transport, making sure that our actual fleet operators understand how these different technologies work, so they can actually get the best out of it for their business and make those informed decisions on the planning side. So Yes, it goes back to so many jigsaw pieces, I think, coming together at the right time. But as Bob said right at the beginning of this webinar, the time is now. We can't delay anymore. We've actually got to get on with this. So yeah, let's get those trials results. Let's get them published and so that we can actually understand what the results are. And I think we need those open and honest conversations.
Brilliant. Thanks, Denise. And Hamish, Laura, just in terms of, I'm very conscious of time because we're now overrunning slightly, but just in terms of sort of closing comments, are there any sort of policy developments that you think are going to be needed if we are to really help the commercial vehicle sector make that transition?
I think less in terms of policy, I was just going to say that this is a hugely exciting time to be involved in the sector. And I think we should all, whilst have an element of fear of the unknown. There is a lot of known now ahead of us, and the time is now for us to make action. If you think about how demand for electric vehicles across the board is rising, and ELCVs in particular, this is on the first generation of ELCVs that have generally just been conversions of internal combustion engines. And so once you actually have the ELCVs that are built from the ground up, that's really going to change things. You have vehicles that are much more fit for purpose. So it's a hugely exciting time for us to be moving forward. And I think the UK is really taking a lead in this now.
Thanks, Hamish. And Laura, from you?
Thanks, Catherine. The only final thing I was just going to say was in relation to the trials that the government pledged yesterday in its hydrogen strategy. If they are going to look at trialling different sort of ways of using the vehicles and where actually hydrogen could come in, they do need to look at different sectors and different kind of use cases, because actually that's one of the things we've been doing is looking at actually where it could fit in, the types of journey, the types of customers and the types of use. We think the government would just need to make sure that the trials they run actually do cover all of those different kinds of uses. So, for example, make sure that you involve the fleet sector. I mean, there's lots of knowledge amongst the BVRLA members and the sector more widely in terms of how their customers are going to want to use those vehicles. So just making sure that the government kind of taps into all of that knowledge and tests the vehicles in lots of different situations to kind of work out actually where it does fit the best for the UK.
Greg?
I think the most important thing the government can do is to make sure it implements its ZEV mandate quickly, and it sets ambitious targets for the manufacturers to meet. Because if it does that, the manufacturers will supply into the UK market, and I think they will also start to invest more in manufacturing in the UK. It will create opportunities for companies like Arrival and LLEV. It will create opportunities maybe that we can get electric vehicles being built, electric vans built at Luton as well as up in Ellesmere Port. The government shouldn't be afraid to push the manufacturers, because that's the way that we're going to get the supply into the market, and that's the way that we're going to get the prices down.
Thank you all so much. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Thank you to all of our speakers and panelists this morning. Thanks all so much. And just in terms of a couple of closing comments. So as I mentioned at the start, the video will be available to watch again afterwards. Just a quick event that we have running. We have our Fleets in Charge digital conference, which is happening on Thursday, the 7th of October, 9:30 till 2. This is a one-day event for anybody with an interest in the success of the fleet industry and road transport decarbonisation. We've got a number of high-profile speakers, panel discussions and breakout sessions, which will form part of an interactive and insightful agenda. It's free to attend, and I'm hoping that my colleague will post a link in the chat, but it's also there on screen as well if you'd like to have a look at that. And then just in terms of some upcoming EV training courses that we have a BVRLA fair wear and tear standard for commercial vehicles over 3.5 tons. That's a remote learning course running on the 2nd of September. A commercial vehicle legislation course on the 13th of September. This covers the fundamental legislation and regulation that underpins the correct operation of commercial vehicles. And then we have an electric van and trucks operational support and fleet management course on the 22nd of September. And that's run by Tim Campbell, who spoke earlier today. So to book a place on any of those courses, please visit the BVRLA's website and go to the Learning and Development tab. Thank you so much for joining us. Apologies, we've overrun slightly, but thanks for sticking with me. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks very much.